وَمَن يُضْلِلْ فَلَا هَادِيَ لَهُ. That if God chooses to guide someone, they cannot be misguided. But if Allah allows someone to be misguided, they will not find guidance except with Allah. I'm mentioning this because I want to orient our hearts and our intentions. We are here not merely for information, but for what? For what? Transformation. Is that right? We're here not to be just learn something from this speaker up here, but to be guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, the only intention that is accepting to our Lord is to be here for our Lord. Are we here for Allah? Are we? Are we here for Allah? This is not just a statement of reality, it's an aspiration. I'm working on it right now that I want to be here fully for Allah. You know, when you're giving speeches, there can be 10% of you that's just like, I want to give a really good speech. You get what I'm saying? And that becomes your focus. Like, I want to speak well for Islam. It's very easy for your intention or my intention to slip a little bit. And I want to remind all of you. The reality is that on the day of judgment, some of you have heard this before, a man will arrive upon the day of judgment having spent his entire life in the service of Allah, and his deeds will be like a mountain in front of him, and it will disappear like a mirage, because Allah will tell him that there was not a single act out of a lifetime. The Prophet ﷺ described this man as the greatest loser on the day of judgment, because he sacrificed his entire life in this life, and then he gets nothing from the hereafter, because he is told that his lifetime of good deeds was for other than Allah. Are you all with me? But the other side is so powerful. The Prophet ﷺ said that if a group of people gather for Allah, Allah will send angels to that gathering. The angels will surround that gathering. The angels will spiral up through the skies, will transcend the mulk, which is this lowly realm, will enter the malakut, which is the angelic realm, and will announce the name of every soul present in that gathering. And then the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, and there was a man who was walking by and didn't even intend to be part of that gathering. And just because, or a woman, just because they were there, they're included in this blessing. My brother in the Arkansas sweatshirt. Are you from Arkansas?
Other side of your mom.
Sorry?
My mom's side.
Mom, okay, because I know one Muslim from Arkansas. I felt like I met my second. Okay. He's a guy, Yusuf, he's a good friend. So my brother from Arkansas, mother from Arkansas. What is your full name?
Muhammad Hassan Shah.
Muhammad Hassan Shah. Do you believe that in this moment, if our hearts are for Allah, that your name is actually ringing in the malakut, announced by angels in Allah's presence? Is that overwhelming or is that overwhelming?
It's overwhelming.
My sister right here. What's your full name?
Khadija Tipu. Khadija Tipu.
Khadija Tipu. Is that amazing or not? Isn't that enough reason for us to gather? Not to remember, but to be remembered. Not to speak, but to be spoken of. Are you guys hearing what I'm saying? And Allah doesn't need the angels to announce our names. He knows our reality more than the angels. He's seeing us in this moment more than the angels can see us. But it's this grand celebration to celebrate the intentions of a group of people that were there for Allah. I want this to be one of those gatherings. This is a commemoration of that intention. So I ask you all again, whether you're in the back or in the front or the middle, whether you're getting your drink or you're here in this gathering, are we here for Allah? Are we here desperate for His guidance? Yes? Who remembers what I've been saying the last two sessions, a few weeks ago? I was actually in Puerto Rico last week, so I wasn't able to be with all of you. But what were we talking about, speaker versus listener? Who can remind us? Speaker versus listener. Speaker versus receiver. Was anyone here for my previous two talks? It actually looks like a new group. Who was here? Raise your hand. You were here. Hang on. You remember.
Are you talking about the same talk where we did like the surgeon analogy?
The same talk, but remember we said our community is so focused with speakers?
I think I was late to that.
You were late to that.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Is this the first session?
Come on up, come on up. I know you remember. Come on up right here. Oh wait, can you stay from there?
Yeah.
Alright, go ahead.
You were saying like in the first session that you did where you were talking about like how you don't like you don't want to just be seen as like a speaker, you don't enjoy speaking, but your purpose is to try and build the kind of community that the Prophet ﷺ had.
Right, that was part of it. Part of it was, and I'll say this in a very simple way, okay? This is important because nothing I say after will have the same meaning if we don't internalize this. As a community, we are focused on speakers. We are focused on speeches. When you leave an event like this, someone will ask you, how was it? Meaning, how did this person do? Is that right or no? Is that right or no?
That's right.
So we are focused on how good was the speech by the speaker. When we go to Ikhna or Isna or Zaytuna or Al-Maghrib or Yaqeen or whatever, Qalam, we're circling our favorite speakers. Is that true? And what we spoke about in the past, for those who are new, the reality is, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr and Abu Jahl heard from the same speaker. What led one to become the greatest companion after Khadija radiallahu anha, and what led the other to become the greatest enemy after Abu Lahab, was how they received, not how was it spoken. How have we ever asked the question? Not how was the person on the mic, but how did we receive? How were the receivers that night? Oh, how did the event go? We received well. That's not part of our discourse. Because we are persona driven. We need to become transformational driven. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? What made the companions so great was that yes, they had the greatest speaker of all time, Rasulullah ﷺ. But it's how deeply they were ready to receive. Umar radiallahu anhu would take the same sword he's trying to kill the Prophet ﷺ with, and he would defend him the same night. He was ready for transformation. As we have said, he wanted to put the Prophet ﷺ in his grave, and he is now buried next to the grave of the Prophet ﷺ. That's receiving deeply. You know, there's my brother in the back, who he has a lot more knowledge than me, so it's kind of weird that he's in my talk. But some of you guys know Saif is the founder of Fawaqih, and I think he'll appreciate this because it's like a Quranic Arabic reflection. Imam Ghazali, in his book Kitab at-Tawbah, the book of repentance, he says something remarkable. And I want everyone to get settled and just hear this. I want you to hear this because it's not coming from me. It's coming from maybe the greatest theologian in our history. Listen to this. And he's actually the one I'm going to be using for our talk today. Imam Ghazali said that in Ayat Nur, you know, the verse that has Nur ala Nur, there's this a part of the verse, and it's like a really kind of mystifying verse. Like if you read it, it just is, if you like poetry and metaphor, of course the Quran is not poetry, but it's like something that transcends any imagination. It's beyond the realm of rationality. And in Ayat Nur, there's this one part where it says, is like oil that glows even though the fire has not touched it. Right? Imam Ghazali says that is the soul of the person who is so ready to be guided that they barely see the fire and they're set aflame. That reference in Ayat Nur, that it's like oil, you know, like fire lamps. We have to know where it comes from to understand it. You use like those lamps that would have oil in it. You would light it and then it would glow. He says that there are some people who are so ready to receive They don't even need more than a spark, and they're set aflame in light. And there's other people, I'm adding this part, that are like a wet candle. You just cannot get them to start. We want to be open, that it takes us a nudge and we go flying. And the greatest companions were like that. They would hear something from the Prophet ﷺ. They would hear a verse of the Quran, it would penetrate them, and then they were transformed. There were people, it's crazy to think about. You would see people walking in the streets and they have one state, right? They would go and meet the Prophet ﷺ, and people that have known them their entire lives, they would see them coming out of that gathering and they were literally a new human being. There was a man who wanted to kill the Prophet ﷺ that snuck to the Prophet ﷺ in Umrah. And he had a knife underneath his cloak. And the Prophet ﷺ went to him, knowing that this was the case, this was knowledge from Allah. He touched him on the chest, right over his heart. And the man said, "Today I woke up and you were the most hated person to me. And in a single moment you have become the most beloved person to me." That type of transformation is possible. So I begin with this dua. May our hearts be united for Allah's pleasure alone. We begin the dua of khutbah, the dua of speeches, in Alhamdulillah, right? As I said earlier. This is a calibration of praise to Allah. We don't praise the person speaking. If you like what you heard, make dua. The praise is not for this person with the microphone. It's not for the lecture. It's for Allah, because any guidance, if it's true, it's a river coming from that ocean. Our focus here tonight is drawing close to Allah, and we make the dua because it is not promised that we will reach tomorrow night. I know the lights are up in the masjid, but we had a family friend who just passed away last week. Allah yarhamah. She held on for 12 nights trying to get to Ramadan. And now it is her intentions that will give her the blessing of Ramadan, and she may receive more blessings than any of us. But she physically did not make it. So Ya Allah, allow us to reach Ramadan. Ya Allah, allow us to reach Ramadan. Allow us to reach Ramadan. And allow this Ramadan to be completely transformational. Inshallah. Now we're going to talk about transformation. Imam al-Ghazali, who I spoke about, 12th century scholar, perhaps the greatest theologian of all time. At 32, he's the head of the Nazamiya school, which is the greatest university in the Muslim world, and he's 32. So he was the greatest scholar during the golden age of Muslim scholarship. Are you with me? So along with scholars like Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya and others, these are like the scholars that, at least for me, have classically influenced me most. Ghazali, at 32, head of a school that is the greatest school in the world, and he's in his early 30s, people all around the world have accepted that he is the mujaddid. He is the reviver of Islam of his century. The Prophet ﷺ said, every century there will come a person that will revive the deen. And he is considered the mujaddid of the golden age of Islam. And even then, he has a sincere moment when he is teaching his students, and he feels like in that moment of teaching, he has become arrogant. One of our scholars, Sheikh Hamza, he said that a disbeliever, he was quoting from a scholarly reference, but he was talking about this. He said a disbeliever can be in a single state for 40 years. And a believer can go through 40, and there's different numbers are used in there, 40 different states in a single day. What it means is that a believer's heart is alive. They are sensitive to their spiritual ups and downs. We're not on this emotional, spiritual cruise control, and we're like assuming we're doing okay, and we just kind of let life pass. Imam Ghazali, while he's teaching people, if there was ever a time where you could feel artificially secure, it would be when you're teaching Islam and people are benefiting, and you're authentic, and you're so knowledgeable. Shouldn't Ghazali's guards have been low? Like, I'm good? Even then, as he's teaching, he's not just focused on what he's saying. He's focused on the state of his heart as he's saying it. And he realizes in a single moment of bitter honesty that he has become arrogant. And he literally goes mute. he cannot say a single word after that. And he has a spiritual crisis from which he's going to have to write a book called Deliverance from Error. Where a scholar at the peak of his game, you know the difference between him and Shaitan is? Shaitan was the most knowledgeable amongst the jinn. He became arrogant, he doubled down on his arrogance. Imam Ghazali becomes arrogant, he's the most knowledgeable scholar perhaps of his time, and he doesn't double down. He falls in sujood. And he begs Allah for deliverance. He leaves his post. He travels for a decade, goes to Damascus to the Umayyad Masjid, begins cleaning bathrooms, overhearing people studying his books. Students make mistakes and they don't know it's him because there's no social media. You don't know what people look like. And they're like, literally the janitors over there, and they're like, I really think Ghazali meant this. And he's like, ugh. He finally can't take it anymore. And he goes, he says, I don't know. Because they were misunderstanding in a harmful way. He couldn't let that go. So he's like, I really don't think Ghazali. Like, what do you know? Trust me, I don't think Ghazali meant that. I think he meant this. And they go to their teacher and it says, that janitor is saying that we're misinterpreting this. And then the teacher says, only Ghazali could have given you that insight. Go find that man. And he escapes Damascus. That's when he left Damascus. Why am I saying this? Because this man, Imam Ghazali, what he was concerned with was the meaning that was deeply lost in motion. Ritual can either deepen your connection to Islam or it can kill your worship. When you do something over and over again, it either gets more profound or it loses all meaning. Are you guys with me? Are you understanding? Some of us struggle with this. Like, have you ever had that experience where you're in Taraweeh and everyone's crying around you and you're having a hard time crying? Yes? Most people are not understanding what is being recited, but they're in an emotional, spiritual state, which is beautiful. How beautiful would it be if we actually knew what was being recited? Have any of you had this experience? Like, listen, my brother is not here right now, so I can make a quick plug for Fawaqih. Or any Quranic, I don't care where you learn, but if you don't have Arabic, make the intention to learn. Right? I learned years ago, I forgot most of it, but what I learned of Arabic was life-changing. And the reason is by increasing our vocabulary of the Quran and our grammar and all of that, you're not praying. I want to ask any of you, you don't have to raise your hand, but just tell me if this is relatable. Have you ever had that experience where you're listening to the Quran, and you're waiting for a word that you know? Huh? And you hear the word Musa, and you're like, okay, now we're to Musa, I'm sorry. It's like 3 more minutes, you're like, Pharaoh, it's like, okay, so there must be something going on with Pharaoh. And then you hear Sama, it's like, something with Moses in the sky, or maybe not, right? If our connection to the Quran is at that level, and we're still crying, it's a miracle. It means that we're still feeling despite ourselves, right? Like, we have learned every language but Arabic. And if you memorize the top 500 vocabulary words in the Quran, you'll probably start understanding 20% of your Taraweeh prayer just by doing that. But the idea of Ghazali was to go even further than that. What he was concerned about, and I want you guys to follow me. If you have your phones, this is the only thing I ask everyone. There's 2 things I'm going to ask everyone to write down, okay? I know the culture of taking notes is like kind of gone. It's like a generational thing, and I'm really worried about it, to be honest, because 15, 20 years ago when I was studying, there would never be someone without a notebook. And now it's like, there's like 3 sisters with a notebook and literally maybe 1 brother. And out of like 50 people. And I really think this culture needs to change. So my recommendation, and you don't have to write down everything I'm saying, but if you find something from my teachers, from our scholars, from the Prophet ﷺ, that leaves an impression upon you, I promise you, it is like a sandcastle. It will wash away. Within a week or 2, it will be fuzzy feelings. Think about the talk I gave 2-3 weeks ago for those who were there. How many details do you remember? Everything becomes fuzzy. That's why I mentioned a few weeks ago, one of our scholars said, the people who are seen as most knowledgeable in our community are not the ones who have just learned the most. They're the ones who have forgotten the least. If we had retained everything we have heard of Islam, people would think we're a scholar. every Jummah khutbah, every halaqah, every reflection, every book, every article. But our retention is like 1%. So we're constantly inputting knowledge because we keep forgetting everything. Are you guys with me? It's like we wipe our hard drive every week and we think we're going to gain something. We're not. So I strongly, strongly recommend that we take notes. Are you all with me? Okay. Now I don't even remember that one thought that I mentioned. Shoot, it always happens like that. I didn't even introduce that a little bit so you guys could give me a hint. I didn't say anything, did I? I said if you don't remember anything, remember this. Shoot, that's a cliffhanger right there. Oh man. Yeah, the second one I remember. The first one, oh man. Oh, it's coming, it's coming. It's right there. Sorry, everyone, can you guys all close your eyes so I don't get nervous? Just close your eyes. The spotlight is not helping, but just 1 second. It's like right there, but then it's like going in the opposite direction. Okay, fine. I'll go to the second one, then we'll get to the first one, inshallah. So Imam Ghazali, what he was talking about is that there is a level of spiritual understanding that, oh yes, I can, oh, alhamdulillah. Okay. No, I'm honestly, this would have, like, I'm starting to sweat. Like, I don't really get nervous public speaking, and now woo, okay, I'm good. Bismillah. Okay, Allah gave it back. Okay. This is something I want us to capture, okay? The goal, this is my understanding of Ghazali. This is not him speaking. This is my understanding of someone that, my email address is Ghazali Project. Like, I'm very much into the scholar, okay? He said, what he says is that the greatest danger of our time is that we stay within the form of religion. What I'm saying, my understanding of that, is that if you look at the lived reality of Medina, the lived reality of the companions, Islam was not theoretical. Do you understand what I'm saying? You don't understand what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? You do understand. Islam was not talking about Islam. Islam was just doing stuff. When I say you don't understand what I'm saying, I don't mean that literally. I know many of you guys are much more knowledgeable and smarter than me. Islam cannot be reduced to the talking about Islam. Islam was not a series of lectures that you hear. The Prophet ﷺ actually gave very few lectures. He taught people while they were doing things. His hadith were words that were spoken while he was living. As we have said in the past, his hadith were not, and I know we know this, but I want us to just internalize this. His hadith are not his best quotes. His hadith are not documentation or transcriptions of his speeches. What are his hadith? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. What are his hadith?
It's like how to do things.
Yes,
How to practice.
but what are they literally? It's what he said, but give me more.
Like conversation, action,
Is it the best quotes? The best things he said? Now I want us to really understand this. What are his hadith then?
His acts? His actions?
My dad just said it. It is literally everything he ever said. I don't want us to pass by this point. You take a man, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you transcribe everything he said. By the way, my brother in the back, I don't know why, I feel a connection. Like every time I speak, there's always one person I feel a connection to, so it's you. So I just want you to know that. May Allah bless you. I don't know who you are, but may Allah bless you. Like I feel your light, I'm not kidding. You were sitting here, and then I felt lost when you walked away. You were right here, right? You want that cookie, no, I get it.
No, it's because I've got that mullet energy.
Because I'm from Indiana, I used to have it. Okay. Oh, you have a mullet kindred spirit. Okay. Mashallah. You're also hilarious. Okay. Ah, shoot, if I lose it again. Okay. So everything Rasulullah ﷺ says for an entire lifetime after revelation is recorded. And all of it is beautiful, all of it is meaningful, everything is translatable a millennium later and still eloquent, and not one word was wasted. I want us to imagine that someone wrote a book of hadith for us for today. Everything we said since we woke up today, how much of it would be beneficial? And how much of it would be nonsense, even in the present day. Now imagine if it was translated in some future version of Chinese 1400 years later. And they'd be sitting and it would be like the hadith they would be reading is, look, I understand Arby's is overrated, but I think the curly fries are actually really good. And the person would be like, I think they're overseas. And people would be like, can you imagine if someone said, Hala Saladin, the curly fries are, like, that's how we talk. The Prophet Saladin is here. But the Prophet everything he said was so eloquent. But it was real life. And companions were living real life with him. What happened is after he passed away, we had to create sciences to capture what was once organic. You following me? This is, I know we're like almost at the end of the speech, I haven't started yet, but follow me here. Because this is actually at the heart of everything I want to say. We are trying to capture with the sciences of Islam what was once organic. It is not negative that's artificial. Like even Arabic. You have to create a science of Arabic because people no longer know Arabic, but the Arabs never learned Arabic. They learned it by living around Bedouins. They learned it by living. The hadith were literally what you were hearing in the air. Hadith were like, oh yeah, I was there when he said it. No, I get it. It was like very natural. The seerah, you didn't study seerah, you were actually at Badr with the Prophet ﷺ. Are you guys hearing me? So what Ghazali realized is that something very deep gets lost in translation when you write books about real life. And Ghazali talks about this. He says, if you take the experience, he gives two analogies. One's a little inappropriate, so I waited till my little kid students are gone. But one thing Ghazali says, not inappropriate like that, but he says if you taste your most delicious food that you've ever had, like my mom, since she's here, the first time she's at Kahwa, can you give my mom a big hand? No, because, so then you use, okay. So Najia, my wife, said she only didn't come because she wanted you to have your first experience, and you've been here, so that's on her. Okay. So she missed because of that. Okay. And my dad's here, you can give him a big hand. Any little thing that I can share, I've learned it from my parents, alhamdulillah. And my teachers, but they're first and foremost of my teachers. But what I want to say to understand this is, I think of my mom's biryani, right? It is, does anyone else have a parent's biryani that's like very dear to them? You raise your hand. I guarantee you that you are subjectively and objectively wrong. Like and I'm not trying to be aggressive. I'm not trying to be aggressive, okay? But everyone thinks their mother's biryani is the best. And I've had a lot of mother's biryanis. And it's just not. And it's weird that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives this blessing that everyone's tongue. I'm kidding, I'm not gonna make this a serious point. But imagine, I'm just kidding. But imagine your favorite food. What Ghazali is saying is, if you try to document what it tastes like, do you agree that you will never be able to capture the taste? We're trying to taste the Medina of the Prophet ﷺ. We're trying to taste the Islam of Rasulullah. When the Prophet ﷺ said the word Allah, he felt, as the Quran mentions, Surah Baqarah, believers are those, when they hear the name of Allah mentioned, وَجِلَ قُلُوبُهُمْ, they feel a tremor in their hearts. We're trying to feel that same tremor. But just like you can never document the sweetness of that favorite food, we have scholars who are trying to document the sweetness of the companions and the Prophet's lived experience of Islam. And the books can never do it justice. Are you with me? So what Ghazali did was he left the books for a decade. And he went on a journey to finally taste. He didn't want to talk about worship. He just wanted to immerse himself in it. He didn't want to talk about humility. He wanted to humble himself. What he was striving for was experiential knowledge of Islam. And what we're going to talk about now briefly today, because I know time is maybe of the essence here, is when it comes to fasting, Ghazali said there are 3 layers of fasting. There are 3 what? Layers is very critical here. The analogy has been given is look at a beautiful ocean. Do you agree that someone could be on a boat looking upon that ocean and they would experience beauty? Would we all agree with that? No, answer loud.
Yes.
You guys with me? You know, I once spoke at a Masjid Muhammad in Atlanta, and it was like a Baptist church environment. And I said something, and this brother like yelled at me like, "Okay, brother!" And I was like, "Whoa!" I was like, "Man, I wish immigrant audiences felt like this." It was like so energizing. Like Baptist ministers just live on that, and they start jumping up and down and all that. But it's so nice when you hear like an audible response. Okay, you're like testifying back there. Okay. But do we understand that this deen, if you were to look at the ocean and someone said it's beautiful, everyone would agree it's beautiful, yes? Unless you're like, hate oceans. If you go a layer below and someone saw the beauty, they would tell the person at the top, you haven't seen anything yet. And then if you go deep sea diving, and you saw the wonders of the ocean, there are more species below water than above. What would you tell the people at the higher levels? You can't discount their experience of beauty. But it's a world that we don't have access to. That's what you would say. It's like you don't even know what's down here. And the reality is this deen is for deep sea diving. And for many of us, we have lived on the surface of our deen so long, we don't even know it has layers. One of our West African scholars, he said, look at a frozen lake. Look at it melt like a normal lake, a frozen lake, and then look at the lake when it bubbles and then it turns to gas. And he said that is Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. You begin and your deen is solid. You get your foundation, your 5 pillars. It's solid. And then you think that that's the end of your deen. In the Quran it mentions the Bedouins, they said we're believers. The Quran says, you're not believers. Don't say you're believers. You have accepted. You have become Muslim. You're not mu'min yet. This is a summary of the verse. That there's a difference between accepting the 5 pillars and tasting your iman. As those who have heard our previous speeches, Bilal, when he was being tortured, radiallahu anhu, he began to smile. And some of those people torturing him became Muslim later. They said, Bilal, there's one thing we never understood. Why were you smiling at the peak of torture? And Bilal radiallahu anhu said, it was at that moment I tasted the sweetness of my iman. That's different than saying I am theoretically Muslim. I follow the 5 pillars. That's different. And so the West African scholar, he said, you have a lake that's frozen, but there's no depth. If you try to dive, what will happen? You'll get a concussion. There's no layers. There's also no flexibility. You can't take that solid lake and put it into any container. It's rigid. It leads to friction between people. If you don't go beyond the form of religion, you're always going to be fighting other Muslims. If we went to Battle of Uhud today, in the Battle of Uhud, there were 1,000 Muslims who went out. 300 hypocrites came back. We would have 1,000 different armies. We would have a hard time finding 2 Muslims that would fight together. Because like, well, I don't agree with them. I think they're more like Salafi. I'm more Sufi. I'm going to do this. I'm going to we kind of both like Dallas, but he's more Yaqeen. I'm more Qalam. It's like, what? It's like everything is so fragmented. How do we march together? So that's what happens when our deen becomes solid. And Ghazali is teaching us to go deep. And then this West African scholar said, through spiritual purification, through the heat of effort and worship and checking your nafs and asking questions like intentions, what am I doing here? Every second, am I doing what I'm doing with a good intention? Am I drinking this water like a mundane act? Or is this actually an act of worship? When I say salam alaikum to my dear brother in the blue, what's your name again?
Zaki.
Zaki, I know we've met. Do I actually care about you or not? And I do. Is my salam alaikum a dua or a greeting? Is it real or is it just form? And then Islam can lose its flavor. It can become an ideology. It can become a so-called identity. It shows you how to live in this world, but doesn't allow you to transcend this world. It's a way of life, but it's not a way of dying. It's just Islamism, like Sheikh Hamza Yusuf said, like capitalism, like communism. But he said with spiritual purification, the frozen lake begins to melt. And now there's depth. Now there's layers. Now there's actually flexibility. You can put that water in any container and it will fit it. You can be principled yourself while being empathic. Now, I won't go into this in detail, But there are two extremes that I see in the Muslim community on almost every issue, especially social issues. When it comes to LGBT stuff, and I know I'm opening up a thing, whatever, but there's like either the side of like principled but non-empathic. And then there's the side of we have to make coalitions, empathic, but you are fuzzy on your principles. So we have to change our Islam to be more politically correct. The truth is actually in the middle. We can maintain our principles while being loving and empathic. While we cannot change who we are to embrace things we don't believe in. But we don't have to be jerks about it. Are you guys with me? That flexibility comes from water. So I can say that I believe in traditional marriage. I don't believe in homosexual lifestyle. But I would still take a bullet for my brother or sister who is gay if they were being abused. That is Islam. And they are as welcome in our community as anyone else. That is Islam. There was no condition for sinlessness to be in Medina. It was not a condition that you had nothing that could be seen as a flaw to be in Medina. I know even that language may hit hard for some people. But if someone has something that's considered a sin, you don't kick them out of the community. So what I'm saying is that comes from your deen going from being rigid to then being flexible. But flexible does not mean you bend with times and change your roots. And that is the difference. Your roots have to be firm in Quran and Sunnah. Your Islam has to be recognizable by the companions and the prophets. It can't become some new age, wishy-washy thing that we updated to try to be lovable by society. No. But true Islam goes from solid to liquid. It goes from Islam, the 5 pillars, to Iman, the beliefs. And one of our scholars, Shaykh Abdul Murad, he said, look at a strong tree. If you have stiff branches, some people think my Islam is stiff and rigid. He says stiff branches are a sign that the tree is dead. He says if the roots are strong, the branches are actually supple. They bend with the wind. That allows Islam to spread all over the world and embrace every civilization. And then finally, you're still on earth. And then the West African scholar said, then the water, through heat and purification, it begins to bubble, and then you can transcend this dunya. Ghazali mirrors these 3 levels when he says the first level of fasting is fasting from food, drink, and intimacy. Are you guys with me? Write this down. This is the second thing I want you to write down. This is the level of fasting most of us stay on. Okay? This is like a big task. Food, drink, and intimacy is the mainline fasting. Okay, we're going to get to this in a second. Is like the baseline, the minimum. Okay? But that's just level 1. And he calls this the ordinary fast. And then the extraordinary fast is the person who fasts from all sins. Now their eyes are fasting, not just their stomach. Their limbs are fasting, their ears are fasting. They're committing no sin of the physical body. Are you guys with me? I'm specifically saying physical body. Okay? But then they also start to go in avoiding sins of the heart. There's a difference between states of the heart and sins of the heart. Now follow me on this. Love is not legislated. There is no legislation on who you love. It's not haram to love someone, but to act upon it could become haram. You guys see what I'm saying? And that's also significant in the LGBT conversation. It is not forbidden to have desire for the same gender. Love or desire is not legislated, but acting upon it is legislation. That's a state of the heart. It is not forbidden to feel anger, but if you abuse someone because of your anger and rage, that can become forbidden. Are you with me? That's why Al-Maghrib Institute's program, Fiqh of Love, is actually a misnomer. It doesn't, but what they mean is fiqh of marriage. I made that mistake. I was with Sheikh Yasser Burgess at a program in Dallas. And he said, why don't you come speak at Al-Maghrib sometime? And I said, I don't know. I just, the fiqh of love thing, it's like not even technically correct. And he kind of went like this. He said, yeah, we mean fiqh of marriage. And then he said, yeah, when I came up with that name, I was like, oh shoot, I didn't realize. But of course they mean fiqh of marriage. But if they actually meant fiqh of love, it would be a big problem. Because you can't legislate love. There is no such thing as fiqh of love. I mean, you can't tell someone it's haram to love. You're not accountable for loving. I actually wish they would change the name. But the point is that that's a state of the heart. But then there are actually actions of the heart. Jealousy and envy are also, you could say, a state of the heart, but they're actually actions. And those can be sinful. So you could feel envy, and that's actually sinful, when feeling desire is not sinful unless it's acted upon. Envy is intrinsically acted upon. You don't have to do anything more. Feeling envy is a disease of the heart, and it corrupts you intrinsically. Are you guys with me? So you have to avoid those things too. And then, so the ordinary fasting is what? Fasting of the food, drink, and intimacy. Are you guys with me? Level 2, fasting from all, whether physical or internal. Fasting number 3, this is where it gets really interesting. He says this is not the fasting of the prophets. They didn't sin outside of Ramadan. Are you guys with me? Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, by the way, he fasted half the year. One of our scholars, Haji Shah Mahmood from Lanterna, he actually calculated all the days that he fasted, Mondays and Thursdays, the middle of the month, the random days he would wake up and there was no food. And he calculated it was the fast of Dawood alayhi salam. It was about half the year, right? So their fasting was also not limited to Ramadan. But he said that this is not the fast of the prophets. This is not the fast of the people closest to Allah. This is not the fast of the companions. You know what they were striving for? Fasting from anything but Allah. Fasting from neutral things. Any action that does not draw you closer to Allah, they would fast from. People at third level of fast would consider their fast broken if they started thinking about the dunya, about the world. They actually considered their third level fast broken. I'm not saying our Sharia fast is broken, right? You gotta make it up and all that. But at their level, there were scholars that were at such a high level and righteous people before us, they would consider it a sin to think too much about iftar. Because they were breaking, not the form. I'm not saying a sin in terms of astaghfirullah, like I'm that person, I'm so excited about iftar. There's like a 9-year-old fasting for the first time and you say, don't think about it. This is where you don't get rigid and crazy. But you also realize, you know, that like the guy Daniel Cormier in the UFC, they said there's like levels to this. Like there are levels to this deen. And it's not all baseline. We can't get stuck at level 1 thinking this is the height of the deen. There were people who believed that if I focus on iftar too much, I have lost the spirit of Ramadan. And as Haji Sham just mentioned in the program with Sheikh Yasser Fahmi, he said that fasting, Ramadan should not even be called the month of fasting. It should be called the month of abstaining. Because when you have iftar, your fast is broken. It's not like Ramadan ends. It's the whole month. But your abstaining has to happen whether you're fasting or not. It's the month of abstaining. And so he also said, do not surround your fast with 2 feasts. Suhoor and iftar. Like if we have to have a diet after Ramadan, like dude, I gotta go on a post-Ramadan diet. That was crazy. That's a problem. It's so much a problem that there are scholars that talk about that we have forgotten that gluttony is a sin. We actually have forgotten. Did the Prophet ﷺ say that thing about like 1/3 food, 1/3 water, 1/3? Was that the recommendation of the Prophet how much we should eat? The trick question, by the way. No. He actually said only eat a few morsels of food. And then he said, but if you must eat more, then 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. That's like if you gotta eat a lot. He said, Bani Adam, the child of Adam, only needs a few morsels of food to keep their back erect, to keep their back straight. But if you have to go further, then 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. All right. Last 2 minutes, we're gonna do a bit of a game, okay? This entire talk is a play on threes. You guys with me? The first level of threes. Try to write this down if you can. The first level of threes is Islam, Iman, Ihsan. Islam is the 5 pillars. Iman is our beliefs. It's when you go from the form to tasting. Ihsan is the spiritual realm, where you're literally living like you can see Allah. And if you can't get to that point, you live like Allah is watching you. What does it mean to live? I'd always learned that, someone mistranslated that. They would always say, pray to Allah as if you can see Him, but since you can't, as if He can see you. Have you ever heard that translation? Someone added that. It was never in the, it's not there. It was always assumed that I was like, pray to Allah as if you can see Him, but obviously no one can see Him, so just imagine He's seeing you. Of course, we can't physically see Allah. I'm not saying anything like that. But Sheikh Yasser Fahmy said, like, where did that come from? The reality is what, and Sheikh Yasser Fahmy is one of our greatest scholars in the country right now, right? He said that, no, you're supposed to actually worship Allah. The highest station is mushahada. It is to witness. In everything, you see the signs of your Lord. So you're actually worshiping Allah as if you see Him. Imam Ali radiallahu anhu said, there's nothing I see, but I see my Lord before it and in and after it. He didn't mean physically seeing Allah. He saw the wind behind the windmill, as Shaykh Abdul Murad says. The profanes see the windmill, the saints see the wind. You see the branch moving, some people see a branch moving. Some people see the wind moving the branch. A scientist will say, it's not the branch moving, you silly aboriginal. It's a wind moving the branch. And then we'll say, no, silly scientist. It's Allah moving the branch using the wind. So to worship Allah as if you can see, and then you'll realize that that aboriginal person knew more than the scientist. In a way, they knew a deeper reality. But you actually worship Allah as if you can see Him. So what happens when our fasting? We get to the third level of fasting, where all we see is Allah. That's the fasting of ihsan. Moving from Islam, which is level 1 fasting. It's just about the law. I want to make sure I don't break my fast, technically. Level 2, so you could literally, and this is something that was mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ, he said there are people who fast, and all they get from their fast is hunger and thirst. That's all they got from their Ramadan was hunger and thirst. It was just all one level. It didn't get deeper. Right? So the game of threes. Islam, Iman, Ihsan. You guys with me so far? Level 1, level 2, level 3. It mirrors it. Here's the last 3. Okay? We talked about the 3 bodies of water too. Solid, liquid, gas. Those are also 3s, right? Ahmad bin Bamba. Now, the last quote of 3s comes once again from Ghazali, but from another book. In The Alchemy of Happiness, I'll end here. And this is going to be like the take-home point. You guys with me? This is a take-home point. Ghazali in The Alchemy of Happiness, he says that the human being, Adam, the Adamic, is called the Adamic potential. What is the potential of Adam alayhi salam? The human being has 3 potentials. How many potentials? It's the game of 3s. Even Ramadan, isn't it the first 10, the next 10, the last 10? It's all 3s. Except Tawheed is 1. Don't get it. It's like not Trinity. Okay. It's all 3s until you get to Tawheed, then it's 1. Okay. Just okay, stuff. So Ghazali says the Adamic potential is 3s. You can either be at the, I'm not trying to be academic. This is like very real and direct. You can either be at the level of devils, you can be at the level of animals, or you can be at the level of angels. Human beings have all 3 potentials. Are you guys with me? I've been sick for 5 days and I have not been able to talk for more than 15 minutes without coughing, and Allah gifted me this hour. It's like the longest I've been able to talk without coughing. He says at the level of devils, you're just creating mischief in the land. All you do is just disobeying Allah. At the level of animals, all you do is eat, drink, and reproduce. The lifestyle of a frat student. What? I lived on the floor with the lacrosse players. They put the lacrosse males on the same floor as the swimming girls. Like the girls team from my university and the lacrosse team were on the same floor, and it was mayhem. It was literally mayhem. I like made my little dorm room into Cape Hira. It was like so much misogyny outside my room, like you won't believe. But what I'm saying is, but is that not the lifestyle of certain people? May Allah protect us from that. Eating, drinking, and reproducing. It's literally animalism. It's carnal hedonism. It's obsession with dunya. And then you go from the level of animals, then he said, but you can also rise to the level of angels, where all you're doing is in obedience to God. You understand? Human beings actually have the potential to be greater. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is greater than all the angels. A normal human being can be greater than the everyday angels. Just not the archangels like Jibreel is. You can't reach that level. But you can be greater than everyday angels because we can do by choice what they do without free will. You can actually become angelic. And here's the last thing I'll say. What Ghazali is talking about in the third level of fast, directly, the 3 levels of fast directly correlate with these 3. Just the order is different. The devils, all they do is sin. That's the second level of fast, right? You break away from sin. The animals, they eat, drink, and reproduce. That's the first level of fast, what we call fasting. But the angels are constantly just witnessing God. And that is ihsan. To worship Allah like you can literally see. To be in that state means your heart does not deviate from your Lord. Your heart becomes like the pilgrim at the Kaaba, and Allah is the Kaaba, and you're constantly in the orbit of Allah, and you do not want to look away. In Surah Infitar, what has deceived you or distracted you from your Lord? And the answer is nothing, Ya Allah. It's just you. And to fast from this world. For fast. It's not like, oh, I'm going through a social media binge. No. I don't want my heart to have any idol. I break everything but Allah. I want to see just Allah. I want to be with just Allah. Seeing, I don't mean physically, of course. Right? And what's beautiful about that, I'll end on this point. The angels, they don't eat. Is that true? They don't drink. Is that true? They don't reproduce. Is that true? They don't sin. When we're fasting, from morning to dusk, we are actually living an angelic lifestyle. This is not from me. It's from, I don't remember who, one of my teachers. Oh, it's actually from Sheikh al-Bikini, I remember now. You're actually, it's on his talk on Fitra, if you're interested. I can tell you the link later. But he says that there, that all you are doing when you're fasting is living an angel lifestyle. Because angels don't eat, drink, or reproduce. But for humans, we can't sustain that. So we just experience what it would be like to live with angel obedience to Allah, so that we can bring that angelic dust into the rest of our life. The scent of an angelic realm. The malakut that we said, the angels surround us and they announce, we want our hearts to drift in that malakut. To know what it's like to not be entangled by this dunya. So then we can go back to having food, having drink, having intimacy, but not allowing it to be a dunya thing. Then even those acts become angelic. Even those acts become worship. Nothing is worldly anymore. Everything becomes sacred, or we have no interest in it. And that is third level fasting. That is what we are reaching for. That's the light we're chasing this Ramadan. Please join me in the recitation of the Asr. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal Asr, Innal Insana Lafi Khusr, Illa Alladhina Amanu wa Amilu Salihat, wa Tawasaw bil Haqq wa Tawasaw bis Sabr. Thank you all. I know I'm over, but thank you all for your attention. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless our scholars. Anything I said of any benefit, it was from the teachers I've learned from, and essentially it's from Allah and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. My many mistakes are my own, but thank you all for listening.
Shukran khairan Ustad for the insightful talk. We'll move on to the second portion of our event, which is the discussions. On the name tags, there should be a small number, it should be 1 through 6. Let's have discussion groups 1, 2, 3 over here, and then 4, 5, 6. So we'll take about 5 minutes to get into our groups.
Assalamu alaikum. I know I usually stay till the end. If you guys forgive me just tonight, one, I have 2 babies at home I have to get home to, but also our families, we won't have any time after tonight to prepare for Ramadan, so I do need to get back to my family. So if you guys excuse me, it's been an honor being with all of you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow all of us as a community to reach Ramadan. Remember the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there are 2 gifts if you receive it, and you don't enter Jannah by it, you have wasted the greatest fortune. One is having parents that reach elderly age, and you don't reach Jannah by serving them. and the other is reaching Ramadan, specifically Laylatul Qadr, and you don't reach Jannah by taking advantage of it and failing it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us both those gifts, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Okay, so we'll take about 5 minutes to get into our groups now.
What cologne do you use?
Sorry?
What cologne do you use?
Oh, my brother actually bought from India.
Oh, from India.
Yeah, got me. But yeah,
Okay. What's your brother's name?
Umar.
So he's gonna get me from India as well?
Inshallah, yeah. You're gonna have the rest of my bottle.
Really?
If I remember next time, I'll bring it.
I don't want to touch it. Jazakallah khair.
No, of course.
Always good to see you guys. Always good to have talks. It's always good to see you guys and always good to have talks. Yeah, yeah. As well too. I think this is going back to the same thing earlier. Like, when you talk about like Islamic law or just the same thing, like when people say law, it's just, are you like ordering it or is it just like a thing?
I don't know how to
That's good seeing you. It's good seeing you.
Of course, man. It's an honor having you. It's good seeing familiar faces. I love this shirt, by the way.
I got it from like
You're doing good. I mean, my dad's leg hurts, but he doesn't go to the doctor, so he'd rather just like keep getting worse. I'm trying to advise him, but his leg hurts. I don't know anyone who's there. Right.
No problem.